Well, I guess that's my cue. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the State Building Code Council Legislative Committee meeting for Friday, October 24th, 2025. It's 1 p.m. We will bring this meeting to order and start with the roll call, please.
Tom Handy.
Present.
Thank you. Todd Byerthrough.
Here.
Jay Arnold. He let us know he wouldn't be able to attend today. Tom Young.
Here.
Thank you. Roger Hiringa.
I am here.
Shell Anderson. Not seeing online. Ben Omura.
Here.
Thank you. And then Angela Haupt.
Here.
Thank you. And Representative Alex Rammel.
Hey, good to see you.
Yep. So with that, we have a quorum of this group.
All right, very good. Is there anybody from the public that would like to introduce themselves? Patrick?
Yes, thank you. This is Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington.
Good afternoon. Anybody else? Okay, with that, then we will move into reviewing and approving the agenda for today.
This is Todd. I move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda as shown. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is to review and approve the minutes from April 24th, 2025.
Pretty short and sweet on that one, just to update at the end of the legislative session for 2024.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. So there's not a public comment on the agenda. Do we want to do that just along with the discussions, or do we want to have a separate public
Well, I think we have room for it. I would defer to you as the chair there. I think that we'll hear a lot of public comment on what we're here to discuss today as part of agenda item number 4, though.
Okay, that sounds good to me. If there's anything further, we can take it up in other business, perhaps. All right, so then let's go on to item number 4, which is to discuss the 2024 codes and the implementation dates thereof.
So just as a quick primer on that, on September 26th, we held a special council meeting. There are 2 motions that affect the implementation date made at that meeting and passed. The first of those motions was to delay the final adoption of the 2024 codes until May 15 of 2026. And that is primarily to allow for drafting of the supplementary documents that go with our code updates in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act and Regulatory Fairness Act. And so we're trying to have reports that go with those that are more defensible than ones put up in the past. And it's taking a little bit more time. There's been some other challenges in the code process that have also added some delays there. And so I can characterize those a little bit later, but we passed a motion to delay that final adoption till May 15. The second motion was to explore administrative and legislative remedies to allow the implementation date to remain to be November 1st of 2026. If you were looking at the statutes that are relevant to that motion, 1927.074 sub 5 sub C, and 1927A.025 sub 3 and also WAC 5104020 number 6. They all say that after we pass final modifications to our codes, that the codes shall not go into effect in the state of Washington until after the next legislative session. So with our our final adoption date falling after the 2026 legislative session, in accordance with those statutes, the implementation date couldn't be November 1st of 2026 and must be sometime after the 2027 legislative session. And we've tentatively targeted a May 1 as just after the April session dates for that implementation date, should we not be able to maintain November 1st. And looking at challenges that we faced for the 2024 codes, we had some challenges that were up front and kind of laid before the council before the 2024 code cycle process started. We had some legal challenges to the 2021 codes, and that necessitated some rework of some of the code language there. And as a result of that, we delayed implementation of the 2021 codes all the way until March 15th of 2024, when at the start of that cycle, the implementation date was planned to be July 1 of 2023. It was then moved to November 1 of 2023. And due to, more rework, that implementation date was moved a little bit further as well. Along with the delays with that implementation date, we kind of had a delayed start on the beginning of work for the 2024 codes. The implementation date of March 15th of 2024 kind of aligns up with where we, our target or have marked for the beginning of the 2024 code cycle. We really began in earnest in April of 2024. And to stick with our 3-year cycle, we need to be front loading this as much as possible, starting in January, if not further beyond that in our 3-year kind of timeline cycles. And that leads me to our next kind of problem that we face, which is delayed publications to begin that work. So not every code that is published by ICC came out published late, but some of them were late, and one of them was the energy code. And so that posed a challenge to get one of our most tumultuous codes started and down the road. And amongst all those challenges, we when I stepped into SBCC as a staffer, it was characterized that we had low staff then, and we continue to still have low staffing and not enough funding to, pursue additional staffing. I don't like to point to low staff as being a prime cause, but if we could have more hands doing the work, we could, do it faster and better. And then, just as a nature of what we're working with the codes updates, over time, since the inception of the State Building Code Council, the amendments have gone from very few to not necessarily overwhelming, but, on some of the codes, we have upwards of 100 amendments each code cycle. And for the energy code in particular, the whole code is essentially an amendment. So any change to any section in that text requires, scrutiny for our rulemaking process for the energy code. And so we face some administrative challenges on getting stuff prepped for, following the guidelines of the Administrative Procedures Act. We're having some troubles keeping up with the cadence of the code cycle as outlined in 1927 and 1927A. And, we're facing, potential delays that have cascading effects into the future. And so some of the desire is to maintain the implementation date to try to stage the 2027 as best as possible. But we're also hearing that a equal delay in implementation date is desired by some of our constituents. And so that's kind of my opening remarks on that one. And I'd like to turn it over to this committee to start discussing and try to answer any questions you may have.
All right, well, why don't we just start this as kind of an open forum here? Dustin presented several different issues that all kind of lead to the same destination, and that being that it's extremely difficult to get the codes in total out in a reasonable amount of time. So, yes, Representative.
Thanks, Tom. I mean, I think it's right that they lead us in the same direction, but there's a couple of different destinations I could see us coming out of this with, in terms of proposing legislation that would help the Code Council address this problem. And so better understanding not only where we are, but where we think we will be, like 3 years from now, would be helpful for me, right? Because I guess, one version of this is we could say, there's only been, I believe it was when I asked the question last, it was only one time in the last 3 decades that we've ever utilized where the legislature has ever done anything to respond to the Code Council. So we've got this window where the legislature can act that it never uses. And so we could address the problem by eliminating that and making November 1 still feasible. We could also create, authorize a delay until after the legislative session and just say, this one time the Code Council can publish these codes later than they would otherwise be required to. Or we could, take a deeper dive and say, hey, look, this is something that we think is going to, have a cascading effect into the next code cycle and maybe the one beyond that. And we need to do something a little bit bigger. So I'm curious if those are the only 3 spots people are thinking about, or are there other ways that we could sort of reconcile this? And then, what are the pros and cons between those options?
Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Rammel, and appreciate your willingness to, I mean, obviously your representation on the council, but also the willingness to collaborate on this. I'll give some of my opinions. I do feel we're at the point where we want the opportunity, a broader look at cleaning up some of our learned lessons from the recent change. I know some feel that no change should be made only a year after a significant bill was adopted. But I think we do have quite a few lessons learned on how to help clean that up a little bit now that we've had some significant changes. The other thing is, I would advocate we very clearly break out those that are council actions, those that are legislative actions, and those that are administrative actions. I think that may be obvious, but as we're discussing certain timelines, again, remind everyone that the council, the technical work, and by council, I'm extending that to all of the technical advisory groups, all of the other stakeholders that have participated in this process. That work is significantly done and can be completed. One thing we haven't discussed much as a council is my concern, if we're looking at it from a council makeup and vote standpoint, we have potentially some significant turnover in January. I was looking at the governor's list of our member list, and the terms that are over January 5th, 2026, in my reading are Tom Handy, Peter Rickey, Justin Burgo, Shell Anderson, Ben O'Mara. And so, as you know, those are all votes that we've pushed from adopting before that term limit and pushing it into a spring. And now it's the governor's will of how he wants to deal with that and nominate people to those positions. But know that we're in that cycle again of either renomination or in reappointment or new members having to come in very quickly and understand how to take a vote in May. So just a couple things I want to put out there, because that's where my mind's thinking. May seems a very long ways away. If we can accelerate that adoption date and then give some relief towards potential implementation date, if possible, through legislative action, I'd like to throw that out there. So thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Greg.
Yeah, I would like to thank Dustin for all your hard work and your staff. I know it's a big challenge, and thank you for highlighting all the challenges. My opinion is there's not just one solution. You probably need a suite of solutions to help fix things. And I'd like to just suggest one item for the long term is on the energy code, which had 160 code proposals. If you switch to the IECC as your base and then did adoption, and then you could keep all your same Washington State amendments, you just convert them to amendments as opposed to having it the other way around, it would streamline the process a lot. And I can tell you that, I mean, there's a lot of times where we were spent time debating things like the intent statement, which doesn't change even the applicability of code, but we were really tied to our own description of the intent statement for Washington State. And so we went with that instead, where that didn't really even change anything. So we could streamline the process. I mean, it wouldn't solve everything, but it would greatly reduce staff workload. And we could just keep all the same stuff we already have. So.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. That's been discussed, and the workload up front is probably the biggest barrier, to doing that. However, there is kind of a consensus that perhaps after it's done, that it may lessen the workload. But, it starts to come back to, in part, the amount of staffing, available at the SBCC, the risk of burning some very talented people out, and the complexity of a lot of these requirements, as we're moving forward, to be continually being done, at the by the same amount of people, with a bigger workload. There's been a little bit of talk perhaps about, increasing the revenue for the Building Code Council through a rate increase, which I believe hasn't increased at all in 7 years. There's not much that hasn't gone up at all in that 7-year time period. So it kind of hamstrings the council even a little bit more in that regard. So, I mean, I think you're totally right, Greg, about having a suite of solutions, because there's not one silver bullet for this. I think we need to look at a number of different things that can kind of happen in concert to solve the issue. Anybody else? Yeah, Katie.
Yeah, I was curious about what you said, that the legislature only has utilized their kind of override or tweaking, Representative Rommel, like once that you found. Was it a drastic overhaul, or when was that? And
It was the WUI, wasn't it?
it was the WUI. Okay.
Oh,
So that
I thought the WUI was a different process we'd done that on.
Yeah, wouldn't
It was
characterize-
Krista that answered that question when I asked it last time. I thought it was something that was in the 90s.
Yeah, it was log homes and insulation requirements on log home walls.
and I've kind of felt like that it feels like the legislature could always weigh in, but so just to sort of like take it to, if we were to get rid of that, then it would have been implemented, and if the legislature comes back, like say 3 months later, makes a change, then that destabilizes the industry, because things can change in something that's already taken effect. So that would be the downside. I'm kind of thinking out loud a little bit to try to understand all the options, because it seems like there's 3. And I mean, I would love to hear if anybody else thinks that there's more. We didn't really flesh that out, but I liked that overview. It's really helpful.
Yeah, Angela? Or unless Representative Rommel, do you have something to comment exactly to that? Okay, Angela.
So I guess, my first, I have a few questions. So this is a short legislative cycle, if I'm remembering this correct, which means that no new bills can be introduced. Right? You can tweak existing ones to be totally different, but you can please answer. Yeah, Representative.
We can introduce brand new bills.
Okay.
Because it's a shorter session, if it's a complicated concept, there's less time to get people up to speed and to have briefings and hearings. But we can introduce a brand new bill. If it's a complicated concept, but there's consensus that it's a good idea and it's bipartisan, I think we got a real shot.
Okay, and then that brings me to the bipartisan and thinking that we have a shot with what the legislators did with the WUI and kind of giving a vote of no confidence. Do you think it's actually likely that a bill that's introduced to now say, hey, you don't get to pre-review the codes is likely to happen?
I think it's worth including and considering. I haven't talked to any other legislators about that specific proposal yet.
Okay.
So I haven't polled my colleagues on it to find out if there'd be a concern or not. I think if we said, hey, this is something the legislature reserved for itself back when the State Building Code Council was first created, we've only ever used it once on insulating log cabins. If that tells you how long ago it was that we were arguing about it. We've never used this authority, and it's getting in the way of the efficacy of the agency being able to do the job we assigned them to do. That's an argument that we can reasonably make.
Okay.
I haven't tested that on anybody yet, so I think it's worth contemplating. And we can start to test it, and if that's a direction that you all think that it will actually solve the problem, we can, there's pros and cons that I can sort of see for different approaches, and I'm curious, but I don't think that's a dead on arrival idea.
But that wouldn't solve anything this time, right? Because it'd have to go through session to get done.
It would go through session to get done. What it would allow is that since we moved the adoption date to May, we wouldn't have to let it sit until May of 27. We could do the November 1st date. But as I think you guys read my letter at the last meeting, one, we wouldn't know until after session, which is a 60-day session. Is that? Okay, so we wouldn't know after that until to know if it was going to go or not. But then even after that, like I noted, that compressed time frame between that May date, was it May? Yeah, May date and November 1st is not enough to get the codes done and published. It's just, like I stated, WABO did it last time, and we used an entire team, a consultant. I organized the whole thing. I know what work went into it. And I just, again, stating again, the staffing that SBCC has, and that the energy code was late. And that was, I think, SBCC took care of the energy codes last time. And that's not a shot at staff at all. They do a lot of work, and that is an extremely hard and complicated code. But just for perspective, the end users, we have to learn it. We have to become familiar with it. And if the code's not available until, say, even October, it's not particularly usable, and getting it for printed for my CC and everything. So I think I know that pushing the can down the line and making it May will affect the 27 code. But I think that we've had enough lessons learned with this code cycle that I think we could try and we would have the potential to make the date for 27 if we really pushed. But again, that's my opinion as kind of an end user on the whole thing.
Thanks, Angela.
Can I
Roger?
ask a clarifying question on that real quick?
Sure.
Make sure I understood, Angela,
Yeah.
what you're saying. You're suggesting that it would be preferable for end users to delay, to say we're going to delay the implementation until early 2027. Take all next year to finish it, but then also have space for end users to familiarize themselves, train, publications, etc. Implement in 2027. And then if we do that, you think it is still feasible for SBCC to stay on to do that and have that work bunch up against the start of the 2027 code cycle? But
Yeah.
maybe there's room to catch up there and be on track for 2027.
I think there's room to overlap in the beginning of 2027 because the work that would be being done there would be finishing up getting the Washington State amendments into the base code with ICC so that the publications are actually available to the users. So yeah, I mean, again, not the easiest road, but I don't think it's impossible.
Okay. Thank you.
Roger?
Yeah. So just thinking through, kind of responding to that question. So first off, we did specifically say that we were going to move the date to November of 2026, specifically to allow additional education time. We knew that we were going to be pushed anyway, and we recognize that it's important to allow a time for people to learn the code. And Angela, what you kind of just suggested is the work that the SBCC does kind of ends when those books are published, right? I mean, the learning process, SBCC doesn't necessarily have to be involved in the learning process, right? So what we should be targeting as, or one deadline that we should be targeting is when will there be a code produced that people can start to learn from? And you know, as much as I don't want to push the implementation date out, I also want to be realistic. And then the other thing that I continue to, and I even delved into exactly what the RCW tells us has to be done by December 1st and December 15th. That, Representative Vermel, is what I would like us to address, because I think that this code council could say before December 1st and December 15th for the energy code that we are ready to move this into CR 102 and publish it. If that is enough for the legislature to, at that point, the legislature, it may not be, you know, published and out for public comment, and there's the economic impact and all of that stuff, but the legislature kind of knows any hot button issues by that point. So if we just changed what that definition was, that what we needed to do by December 1st and December 15th, that allows us to, you know, continue on, and I'm thinking that would be a permanent change. But given this cycle, you know, we can continue on and push on down the road and shoot for May to be done. That allows us the publication to be done by September, October, and the implementation of March of 27 or something along those lines. So just this is my thought, and I know there's been conversations that I've not been part of, but If we could really address what that RCW is requiring us to do by those deadlines, would be a small tweak, I think, that would be really helpful in our process.
Sorry, go ahead, Ty.
I have a follow-up, but Roger, can you just restate one more time what your proposal is?
My proposal would be, that the terminology, Todd, might be a little bit, I might not be correct here. But basically that the SBCC has to pass the codes to vote to approve to move them into CR 102 by December 1st and December 15th.
Right.
So we've gone, the tags have done their work. There's a lot of public data out there. All of the changes that we are making are out in the public realm now. They're known. They've not had public comment so far, right? Where the 60-day window for people to make public comment has not happened. But all of the detailed information is out there. So I don't think that we have very many of our codes that we're still pushing to have that final approval of the State Building Code Council to move them into CR 102. So is that sufficient for the council or for the legislature?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Okay. Thank you for repeating that. Okay, so I have 2 points. One, I've expressed my concern as chair, and granted, we elect a chair in January again, when our first meeting back. So, but right now, it does worry me a lot that we have to navigate the rapids starting January 5th. If the governor takes no action, let's assume we can coordinate with the governor very carefully on we have 5 seats out of our 15, which are really 14. So we have a third of our council up for reappointment. And worst case scenario is we have 5 new people. I'm not saying that's bad, that's the governor's prerogative, but we have 5 new people we have to get up to speed to make a major vote on something they weren't part of over 3 years. And Roger, you've expressed many times what that feels like coming in and taking a vote, not being part of the process. So how do we navigate that? Is there a way that we accelerate the vote within the 90 days that are allowed for those seats to stay before the governor makes a new appointment, and we try to get that vote in the first 90 days of after January 5th? I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but this is what goes through my head. Second question I have on that is, Angela and others, can we reverse engineer what is exactly needed by when? Forget all of the other adoption dates and so forth, what is needed for publication and so forth, so that if we were to release to publication what we have at any given point, I mean now for the matter, and knowing that we're going to have to go make some changes if different action is taken before final adoption. But it was very hard 3 years ago, to my memory, the first time we had ICC actually do the publication. There's a lot of coordination. WABO really stepped up. I hope that's a big word file right now, that they're amending, not something starting from scratch. I might be really naive in that, so I just want to put it out there. I don't understand what that process takes. So could we reverse engineer some dates that we have to hit in order to do the education, do the so forth, even if we have minor tweaks? I don't understand why our publication wouldn't come out till October. And then finally, my last point, if I go to the material seat, I won't say this is universal, but there are some significant stakeholders that do want certainty. They just want to know when, if we're going to require external installation on buildings, when do I have to have a warehouse full of that? When do I need to set a process line? When do I need to invest $10 million to go do that? So we don't get in a situation last time, which granted was during COVID, but we don't have enough heat pumps of this type because there's just chaos about when we're implementing. No one could commit to a supply chain to get that kind of heat pump or that type of hood vent or whatever it's going to be, right? So I just put that concern out there, that there are some people that want to see November 1st hit in the supply chain. So thank you.
Okay, Patrick.
Yes, thank you. Again, Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington. Wanted to bring up a few points. First of all, I want to point out that the code won't be finalized until final adoption. And stakeholders aren't going to do a bunch of legwork to prepare for implementation on code changes that aren't fully adopted yet. While there's, a bulk of code changes that have been pushed to CR 102, any of that could change, good amended at final adoption. There's also portions that aren't really complete. They're waiting on things to come in during public comment or right before final adoption to finalize. There's rulemaking that the State Building Code Council is still finishing up. You're also starting new rulemaking, and some of those things have effect across multiple codes or can interact with other codes. So, stakeholders aren't going to they're not really able to fully prepare for implementation until final adoption occurs, because up till that point, it's just guesswork about what's going to be in the code at the final point. Yes, that could be made easier if you very quickly have documentation with all the changes that are ready to go right after implementation. That would speed things up a little bit. If there's a delay in getting access to the printout pages or getting it published in the ICC, that could introduce problems. But it seems pretty widely accepted by stakeholders that the change to having a year between adoption and implementation was a really positive change and very helpful. I know for us, we're planning on providing trainings for our builders that some of them rely on to understand the new code changes, but we're going to wait until final adoption to then develop the curriculum, because it's pointless to develop a curriculum for changes that might not end up occurring. It's also possible that none of these code changes could get adopted. There's always a possibility there. Second, at the council meeting, I just want to point out that all the public comment was in favor of the longer time between adoption and implementation, and I echo the points that Angela made. It's similar issues for code enforcement, in-code users, and builders, and having more time to get access to the code changes that are finalized, and then training and getting ready for that. I'll also, I've made this point before, I'll echo what Greg said. A lot of the admin load could be improved just by switching to adopting to the IECC by reference. The stringency of the code wouldn't really change at all, but just changing your process there would ease up the admin load, and it would also make it easier for enforcement and training to have it be more clearly adopted of the IECC, and then have the state amendments like with the other codes. So those are the points that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Dustin?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things. So kind of related to what Angela was talking about publication timelines and lessons learned here. So if there's been one thing that I could characterize for the 2024 code process, is that we started out with a crunch, and as we pivoted and revamped our schedule multiple times over this process, I learned that every time we tried to make up time by trying to, compress another portion of the work, we ended up not succeeding in completing that in the compressed timelines we were working on. And so, I think that we could get out there. Angela's right. The process to get the published codes done is, I didn't start with a Word document that has, track change, Washington amendments in it. We're essentially going to be starting, we're not starting from scratch. We have some work done in these Word documents we're trying to work with ICC, but it's another drafting problem for staff. Right now, I know Wabo is willing to reach out and do some of this, but some of the difficulty I saw when we were doing it for the 21 codes was that there was a lot of communication back and forth and document control, and we're using PDF editors, and some of the different programs that everybody's using were not all interfacing just right. And I had a very small part in that process for the 2021 codes, but it would be my hope to allow staff to do it. One of the things we hear over and over and over again is that SBCC is asking for a lot of volunteer time. And, not everybody has the capability to, interface with us, 6 hours a week and maintain their day job responsibilities. So, just one of the lessons I've learned is like when we try to, compress other timelines, we weren't successful in doing that across this code. So, right now, if we're looking for certainty that we can tell folks, the outcome of legislative session is an uncertain one. We might get a feeling that there's good traction to put a SBCC bill, but when like one of the things I don't like about our 2024 code cycle is the constant changing of the messaging to the enforcement folks, to the building industry, all the people that are coming to us when we have the change, they then have the downstream cascading effects of those changes. And so my hope out of this is to identify a certain path forward for the 24. And I think we have a problem for the 2024 code, but we, like everybody else is saying, we have probably a multi-pronged approach to, shoring up the SBCC process as a whole. So I'm thinking there might be a remedy for the 2024 code, potentially for allowing the implementation date to remain the same, but we're once again trying to compress something into the back end of this process. And I don't want to necessarily compress it so much that we are once again not succeeding in getting codes out in time. Worst case scenario, I'm thinking codes are published on the day that the implementation date happens, and that's a disservice to the folks who are going to be using that. So I myself am a little in favor of a May 1 implementation date. But then that poses the challenges for the 2027 code cycle. As I'm looking towards that, ICC is advertising that the codes will be available December 31st of 2026. I can't go back in the time machine and look at what they advertised for the 2024 codes, but if they start coming out across that finish line, we start having an issue with not having the material to start this process. And Angela's right, we can also overlap some of this work. Once the proofs are approved at ICC, there's not a lot more work, happening while they're actually prepping that stuff to get out in the publication process. So there's some overlap time where we, don't have a whole lot of draft work loaded up on us right there, but we're likely, we're going to have a lot of work going to try to shore up the process and try to make pivots as we approach the 2027 cycle. And I mean, some of it is group 1, group 2 stuff and having adequate time to do economic analysis on this stuff and engage the public in a way that's not just a rushed process. So, for contracting for analysis on the energy codes, the contractors aren't, attracted to short time periods to do the work in the budget that we have available for that. So, the way I'm looking at the problem is we need more time or more money. And I've been hesitant to approach a more money ask as we run through this, because just the budget environment is not one that seems conducive to bearing fruit that way. And so there's just a couple of thoughts there that I wanted to talk about. And so Angela, I'll turn it over to you.
So somebody had asked about, how we do the ICC work and hope that we start with a big Word document or whatever. And that's exactly what we start with, is a big Word document that's the entire, each base code. But the problem is that the tags don't do their work within that document. So the tags are doing it outside of that. And so in order to give things to ICC, now our WACs, once they get published, those now have to be in strikeout and underline form, because the codes show in the columns, they show when things are removed, added, whether they're states or ICC changes, so that users can tell what differences are and what they're looking at. And so that's a lot of work to do into that base. So it's not just a, cut, paste our amendment into the section and send them a clean document. That's not what we're doing. You have to go through and you have to look, okay, wait, the WACs don't have strikeouts and underlines. So you have to compare them and it's like, okay, what word was removed? What did we add? What's the difference? And that's what is time consuming. It was talked about before the 2024 code, before Stoyan left, that the tags were going to work out of that document. And if that happens, then that will actually streamline the process. It will, once this stuff is, is approved and implementation hits, that document will be ready to go basically in a really short time to just send off to ICC. It won't require all of the proofreading and everything like that by us, because that's what we found when WABO did it, was in the WACs, because they're done outside the code, there are some times when code sections are wrong in the WAC, or different things have happened that are need to be fixed. And so that was a big part of the process that'll be there again this time, because again, you're comparing two separate documents and trying to merge them with edits. So that's part of it. I think next time, if we are able to do the work within the Word documents, that's one way that the 27 cycle can be streamlined. I'm pretty sure that's how Seattle does their amendments when they're creating them, is they work within the document. They actually, I think, have the program and stuff, but it's the same process of everything is there. And at the end, even though the tag process may take as long, the end product is already there versus having to recreate it after the implementation date. So I hope that helps a little bit.
And we started off that process here this code cycle, just when things started not happening in the timeframes we needed them. The draft, to be able to take what we were talking about and insert them into those drafts to then continue that as we went through this, it fell by the wayside to just keep the content rolling.
Yeah, Todd?
Yeah, and thank you, Angela. That helps a lot. I'll preface what I'm going to say by saying I'm confident that our seats are well represented, and that, representing building officials, it'll become very clear on what time frame is important to them. I appreciate, the comments, Patrick, about a very linear process. I'm going to respectfully kind of push back, though. There are many that I represent in industry and then also in design that are already moving forward on certain designs that are coming out. So Roger's going to hit the dates on single exit. We heard very clearly on the dais from Representative Dewar in local governments, she wants to see that implemented by November 1st. Now, there are lots of steps to make that happen, but in order for someone to do that, there are people, architects, engineers, manufacturers already designing solutions to that thing that hasn't yet hit the ground yet. They're in those meetings, they're monitoring, they're starting to design so that they can deliver designs and materials for that solution, so that come November 1st next year, we can start to provide those important solutions to the state. I'm just giving that as an example because that's one I can easily back up and hide under Representative Dewar's words the other day. But that's one example that there are lots in the code that if you're in the materials world, right now it's not even November 1st of 2025. We're talking about over a year away. The equipment was already ordered 6 months ago for those solutions to hit those codes. So there's an aggressive side, and I think it'll just simply come out in the votes on the council, and that might be a minority. I recognize that. So thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Representative?
Thanks. I guess big question for me in just framing and understanding the polls we're talking about here. We keep talking about, May 1, 2027 or November 1, 2026, and they're 6 months apart. But we're not talking about any dates in between the two. Is there something magic about those 2 days, or could we be talking about February 1, 2027 as an option? And then, to Todd's point there about Chair Dewar's interest in single stair in November, but as I understand it, the energy code is going to be harder to hit by then. Is there a workable solution where some pieces of the code have an implementation date earlier than other codes? where the energy code gets implemented later than the residential code, for example. Or does that, or they integrate and it's just too much confusion and it's really is better for industry to do it all at once?
I mean, if I may, the reason the November 1 date and the May dates are chosen is really the sit through legislative session topic. So yes, if we had an allowance on not going all the way through the session, we could bring any date in between those two dates to bear. Looking at the process for maybe having different implementation dates for the codes. It's been talked about several times in my tenure here with the SBCC, but the overarching sentiment is that when enforcing these codes, if you have different implementation dates, it then becomes a very challenging task to, in the future, come back in and apply the regulation appropriately. So it's been just a tradition to really try to keep everything together in one big package.
Thanks, Dustin. Ardell?
Hi, my name's Ardell Jala. I'm the building official for the city of Seattle. Echo Dustin, please don't break up the code in partial implementation. That is a very difficult thing to do. Your question about, what's magical about the May 1st date, we like 6-month chunks. I know that sounds crazy, but a 6-month delay gives that a significant, that chunk of time to make, this is all volunteer time from WABO to make consolidated, codes and make those available to in time to both publish and get training done. That does give us what I would like to see is the May 1st adoption date. As far as Todd's question too, we have people coming in ready to do this work. As a building official in our jurisdiction, I would allow you to come in knowing that by the time so even by the, November 2026 date, that CR has already gone forward at that point. I know that that is going to be the code. Just because it's not the required effective date, I would still allow those provisions to be used, knowing that you had sort of pulled ahead and designed to that code. I'm not going to hold that against you. And it's already there. It's already there's no changing it at that point, right? So just, I think that, yeah, those were my main points. And again, as a major jurisdiction in the state, we would be supportive of the May 1st date as proposed. That does still give us 2.5 years of implementation. So I think that was my other point. The 2027 code goes into effect. I think the target right now is 2029, November 2029. So May 2027 would still get us 2.5 years with that code cycle, which is still a good period of time without crunching it. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Thanks, Tom. And yeah, I guess just to kind of echo some of the sentiments, especially from the design side of things, having certainty is probably the most paramount thing to do a lot of the early planning and provide consulting for clients that are looking at projects that may take 3, 4, 5 years to come to fruition. So knowing what the pathway is going to be in the future is really important. And at our September meeting, we voted, I believe, unanimously to try to maintain the November date for the members that were there. And really, I think the goal there was to really honor the work of the tags and all the people that submitted proposals for the incoming 2024 codes to improve them and find ways to better serve the state. So I think I would definitely recommend that we try to see if there's a pathway to do that makes sense and is able to be accommodated with staff and by other stakeholders, but also recognize the time constraints that exist and also needing to balance that with what we need to look towards for the 2027 code development cycle and yeah, just making sure that we're not continually putting ourselves behind as we move forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Tom?
Okay, so I want to kind of continue on what Todd said, and so I'm the newest member of the council, and please, get all the important votes done before potential new council members, and it's highly important because I can't contribute much to the current discussion about implementation and adoption. But I do want to, I guess, speak to our legislative members in this meeting that the funding for SBCC is tied to permit fees, and permit fees fluctuate upon the economy. But the work of the SBCC is growing at a steady pace and is getting more complicated, and the workload is getting larger. And so, borrowing a page from, the battles between the feds and the state, when sometimes the feds, implement new legislation and the state say, hey, you guys are imposing unfunded mandates. So if you're going to give us something to do, you need to consider how this gets funded. And just keep tapping into and increasing permit fees is not going to work. And just because, like I said, that permit fees fluctuate with the economy, and seem like some of the things that are assigned to the SBCC doesn't necessarily have a real one-to-one correlation with permit fees. And so, I think every time the state legislature said SBCC do this, I think one of our representatives need to say, okay, what is the funding capacity of the SBCC right now? And if we want them to do this, then we need to figure out how this new task will be funded.
Thanks, Tom. Angela.
So I have a question for Ben. So as a design professional, are you comfortable using the 24 codes starting November 1st if you have no published codes?
So I guess the question is, assuming
No published
that,
Washington state codes. So you'll have the base
but
codes.
they've
And you'll
been
have
implemented.
the WACs that you can try to fit into the codes. But are you comfortable designing to them or using them if you don't have the codes, like actual books put together, paper, whatever, before November 1st?
And this is assuming that the implementation date has
Right, it does
occurred.
not move.
CR 103s have been filed.
Yeah. So you're working off of basically the CR 103.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's something that we will typically look at, as knowing that, like for the ICC website, I mean, I think it's maybe just in the past couple months that they've actually posted the Washington State Energy Code for 2021. So like we've been doing that for a year plus. So yeah, it's definitely typical. And I think like Ardell brought up earlier, there's a lot of eagerness to use the new code provisions in a lot of circumstances. And in lieu of having to submit like a code alternate or alternate means to the AHJ for these options, it's much more preferable to have those referenced in the codes that we're using.
Okay, because as the enforcement where we will be reviewing them and things like that, I can tell you that if we don't have published documents or haven't had them enough time to train, one, if you thought that there was chaos with the energy code when we didn't know if it was enforceable or not, there's that, because certain jurisdictions will just be like, hey, we don't have it, we don't know it, we're basically gonna ignore it. And that's not good. I'm not saying that, but I'm just stating what I have heard from different areas. And then it will delay our enforcement because we can't plan, review, inspect, or do things to that. So I guess I I'm surprised that designers are okay working out of the CR 103. But that's fine. That's again just my opinion.
Yeah, and I totally understand the kind of crunch you're under on your side of having that preparation and the ability to provide a reasonable review window as well for us, which is also a big factor for design. Thank you.
Katie.
Yeah, I would also, is there a world where, maybe this is for Angela and Ben, is there a world where like that you could incentivize using the CR 102 or CR 103 if it's filed, to say, you know, but say, well, the implementation date is say in 2027, sit through, but is there like a, could there be like, we're not going to penalize you, like what Ardell said?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to say that not most, but a lot of jurisdictions, one, have zero idea what the CR 103 is. I had no idea what it was until I joined this council, what, 2 years ago, a year ago. Two, I didn't even necessarily know what the WACs are, because as plans examiners, inspectors, and things like that, we do not go to the WACs. We use the inserts in the paper code books. We use the printed Washington codes. So that's why not having the actual printed documents is a problem. It's not necessarily that jurisdictions are going to be, we just hate this and we're not going to do it. It's that they will not know what to do. They're not going to go to the state building code website to find out what to do. We can direct them through WABO, but again, it's one of those things that
It's not practice.
We got to make things enforceable. And if we don't have the proper resources, things get sort of pushed off.
Okay, Representative Ralph.
Thanks. I might be jumping around topics a little bit here, but just wanted to respond to Tom and talk about the financial piece a little bit. First, Tom, just wanted to say, like, your point's well made, and just want to assure you that the legislature does have a process where when legislation is proposed that requires new things to be done by an agency like SBCC, Dustin and his team are then tasked with writing a fiscal note to evaluate what that cost is. And then we don't pass a bill without funding the fiscal note that goes with it. So there is a process for doing that. Doesn't mean the fiscal note's always right. People can write optimistic or pessimistic versions of it, and we can end up with what feels like insufficiently funded mandates, but we try to avoid at least unfunded mandates. Second, I just wanted to say, like, on the funding piece, I took a note of the fees question. I thought that was an interesting suggestion. It's worth talking about. Tom Young, your point that it's variable and wildly swinging, and the workload of the Code Council is sort of fixed and stable, is a good one. And thinking about how we can fund the Code Council and some changes in workload in the coming year, potentially made through this legislation. If it does not come with revenue, I do not see a way to get a bill through the legislature. So I think either we need to have a bill that's pretty close to neutral on costs, or have a bill that comes with some revenue to cover the costs, even if it's a variable revenue source. That's just a political reality I've got to deal with.
I've got a question about that. That revenue part on the building permits. Is this a fee that is attached to every permit, or is it a percentage of the permit cost? That's my first question.
It's a set fee based on the type of permit. So residential permits have a $6.50 surcharge on each permit. And then commercial permits have a $25 charge with a additional charge per residential unit if that's the type of project going through. And then we also get some fees through architecture licensure. And that's where the main portion of our revenue comes from, is surcharges on permits.
So the only variability there really is how many permits are being taken out. It's
Correct.
not based on the value of the permit or how much construction's going on as far as dollar wise goes. It's numbers of permits. And so with that in mind, it seems like it would be something that would be relatively easy to make some adjustments on, and have that flow straight through to the council. So, and I just want to make sure we're framing this to legislative asks. You know, I know there's a lot of foundational knowledge that we need to have is how things work, but if we can hopefully come up with suggestions or solutions, that we may explore at the legislative level, or that may be explored at the legislative level, I think that would be most beneficial to our representative here. So go ahead, Ardell.
Thank you. We've moved past this point, but I did want to respond. Ben brought up being able to submit early with CR 102, 103, great legislation. When we get asked, like, hey, we want to pull this forward, we do ask the question, well, what do you build? What are you designing to? If you think you're designing to 24 right now, like we don't have it. We don't know what that is. It hasn't been finalized, but once it is finalized, we allow it. But I would say there are far more people who are fine with a delayed implementation because it allows them to use the current criteria, which they know, which they've been trained to, which they understand, and the extension of that versus sort of the unknown is just more beneficial for applicants. They know what they've got with the 21 code, and they're in it. Extending that 6 months or 3 months, if it's February, if that's something that is something the council wants to entertain, is probably far more welcome from the applicant side and our understanding of our applicants.
Doug?
Yeah, this is a good conversation, and I appreciate and respect everyone's opinions. It's kind of pulling out, and maybe Representative Ramel, this is kind of pulling out that distinction between these very project-specific focus and what other disciplines we think of as planning. And it's unfortunate we don't do building code planning in our state on 6-year rotated, horizons or 20-year GMA level planning, and we should be doing that. We should have in our comprehensive plans where the building code's going in 20 years. That would be really helpful. And then what becomes unfortunate, in my opinion, is that we do have these fees at the project level that essentially are treating us as a service to the state. It's almost like, the debate over impact fees. How should that be applied at the project level to support, a planning department? And I think that's be a great debate in Olympia. And then the final thing I'll say is absolutely understand and appreciate, that many are just going to be reactive to the codes, and they'll wait for the code and then they'll put something in place, and it may not really affect their strategy, their competitive advantage as a business. But again, I'll reinforce there are many that are already planning not only the 24 codes, but already designing to the 27 codes. And in fact, in a lot of work I have to do, I'm designing to policy. I'm monitoring legislatures in Washington, Oregon, California, because when you get to institutional investment, they're not responsible for the project level. They're responsible for offtakes of 500 to 1,000 units, and they're making those investments right now for forecasting towards the future code. So while I realize we don't have a seat on the council for that, that's really important that we also kind of turn the postage stamp size rudder on the ship and aim that at something too. So, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Any other comments? I mean, it seems like now we've talked about, do we ask for legislation that would allow for the code to go forward without sitting through a session? But I'm not sure that we've got a conclusion on that. It seems like there's maybe somebody else has a different take on that, but what is everybody's take on that particular issue? Roger?
Well, Tom, I think it actually, I think that that is almost a requirement in my mind, because I understand, and I thought about responding to Patrick about the importance of time for everybody to learn, and Angela, and I completely agree with that, and I understand that as a designer, that's important. Although I will caveat that by the way I learn new codes is to go through a design and figure it out on the first design oftentimes. But what we can't lose sight of is if our work is not done by the end of 2026 as a state building code council, we're just going to be in the same problem again next cycle. I don't see us getting out of that. And so if we have to sit through the 2027 cycle, the 2027 legislative session before we issue or implement our codes, I don't see any way that we're going to be issuing the 2027 codes by, you're just going to start pushing it out. And so in my mind, if we could get, whether it is just for this code cycle or moving forward, some deference from the legislature that yes, you can go ahead and issue, what you've done. Somehow we term it as, the tags work is done and the council has blessed the tag work, knowing that we still have steps that have to happen. That has to be done before December 1st and December 15th. That would allow us to continue to move forward this time, and whether it's, whether the codes are done by at least by December of 26 and implementation of March of 26, or maybe we're done by September and implementation is February of 26 or early in 2026, that's fine. The State Building Code Council's work is done so that we can get started working on the 2027 codes, which we have to do as soon as they come out in order to get to work on the next one. So I think that we have to get some deference from the legislature, or I don't see us, it's just going to drag out into the next code cycle and we're going to be faced with the same problem.
Thanks, Roger. Patrick?
Yes, I have a question potentially for Dustin. I'm trying to understand how this affects the SBCC's workload. If assuming you hit the adoption in May and you get permission to have implementation in November of 2026, it seems like you'll have less than 3 months after final adoption to get everything to ICC and published. So then people have 2 to 3 months to train and get ready for the implementation. Whereas if you have implementation in 2027, you would still probably need to get everything done by the end of the year. But how does that affect your ability to start working on the 2027 codes when they're probably not, if I understand correctly, they're not going to get published until December 2026 at like the soonest. So because it seems to me like whether implementation is in 2026 or 2027, you still need to have all your work done in 2026, and then you should, once the codes get published, the workload for the building code council should be like minimal, if anything, and then you should be able to devote your resources to the 2027 adoption. Am I correct in understanding that, or can you help explain how your workload is going to get impacted by that change?
I think that you like on the surface that characterization is accurate. If nothing else changes and SBCC doesn't overlap things to try to get 2027 working a little bit sooner. So if I in a perfect world where Dustin's desire to make an easy button for the council is pressed, I would envision a scenario where the 3-year code cycle begins a year after the publication date of the codes. And that allows some folks to work with the model codes, make some opinions on those model codes, and then allow also the existing amendments reports and significant changes reports to start happening before we're actually trying to engage the technical advisory groups. So ideally, and that translates back to that's like my dream scenario. We have a lot of stuff available right at the beginning of our code cycle. Where that kind of, backload that to overlap over what we're working with now. In order to try to maintain the ship landing to November 1 of 2029, we have to start making up ground somewhere. And as we approach December 31st of 2026, staff needs to start working on the existing amendments report. That's the only thing we can really, truly get going is an existing amendment report kind of framework. We can likely get some drafts from ICC that are, probably almost 100% accurate, but we won't have the published versions online or the PDFs available for purchase and things like that. So the way that you're 100% right. If we need to get all this done in 2026, and if we could get it done in September, the council staff's not just coasting and waiting for the publication dates to come by and, whatever emergency rule or whatever topic comes up at the council meeting. That's not going to be all we're working with. We are going to, as soon as we can get to a point where we can also start working on the 2027 cycle stuff, we're going to begin priming that. I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done by staff and, engaging with the council as well to look at changes to our policies, not necessarily the WAC, but I don't have a bundle of SOPs here for staff to look at to say, for example, this code proposal that just came in meets all of the marks for going to the tag and the council to be referred to the tag. I don't have any concrete methodology. So like for all my predecessors, there's not been a roadmap necessarily laid down for us except for to look at what the APA says, look at what the RFA says, look at what the SBCC statutes say, and just make sure your work falls within those parameters and it'll happen. And so now I'm a fairly new person to the SBCC world. I started in 2022, and I had hopes that Stoyan would be around at least through this code cycle, because I was still learning the process when I was elevated into managing director. I've learned a lot about our process moving forward. And so, just to directly answer the question, if we move it out to May 1st, council staff is going to be working on stuff in that time where hopefully we get the proofs out. We're working on legislative stuff during that time frame. It's a short session, but we're still be a lot of bandwidth is taken up by engaging with the legislature at that time. And, staff is going to be working on really trying to get the 2027 code cycle moving. But like in the perfect world, we would start on January 1 with a significant changes in existing amendments report, and we could kick off the tags working there. And, looking forward, hearing the tag members, not necessarily complain, but to point out that there's a lot of volunteer time at that level for this group. And sometimes we're meeting 6 hours once a week, maybe twice a week for 3 hours, but we have a lot of, in this particular code cycle, a lot of compressed work going there. And I want to envision a regular structure for tag meetings to occur so people don't have to dedicate, significant portions of their week to coming to the SBCC. I am super grateful that everybody has been able to show up in the timeframes that we have, but I would like to reduce their exposure so that they aren't feeling the pressure like, you know, everybody else in the SBCC is feeling pressure, and make it more of an attractive prospect for folks to come and engage with the SBCC. Right now, we have trouble filling all the tag seats because it's just, you know, a roller coaster ride of, you know, we have this plan and now we're trying to meet it, and then we shift, and then like now we have time to breathe. But you know, I can sympathize with folks, especially on the residential energy code tag and residential building code tag. We did a lot of work in a short amount of time, and now we're not going to file December 1 for final adoption. Like, if it was me who put in all that effort, I would feel a little bit like, hey, why didn't we take this step before and space it out and plan this so that we don't have to do a mad dash to the finish line? And so, you know, the impact to SBCC staff is probably minimal, but as much time as we can have to really stage and plan the 2027 code cycle is going to be valuable. So, I mean, getting to November 1, we're going to be on a Nantucket sleigh ride for publication. That's what we're hearing right now. And I agree with that. We got a large lift to make the publications happen. We can interface with some folks who might be willing to volunteer some time to help us. That adds a little bit of complexity to the draft work, but it's not unsurmountable. And if we went to May 1 for implementation, we'd still likely be working on the reports at that time. Hopefully we can still front load a little bit of that into the 2026 timeframe. But you know, I think either way, if we stick to November 1, we're compressing the publication time. If we stick to May 1, we're still kind of compressing the initial reports, which is where like kind of our process suffered the most in the beginning this time. And you know, I really would like to get to a point where we can reliably get reports out to start when the publications are ready, or have a plan that allows us to work with the publications after they've been out for a little bit and plan for delays that are outside of our control.
Thanks, Dustin. Angela, and then Todd, I got to step away for just a couple of seconds. Can you take the helm while I'm gone? Thank you. Angela?
Okay, so I think Patrick actually nailed it on the head. So everybody seems to be of the opinion that, yeah, we can make this November date. I'm sorry, not my opinion. I have to be realistic, and I want a date that I can count on. But okay, so say that staff can make it. So what is the harm in moving the implementation date still? You'll have the codes are done and staff can move on to what they're doing, but then you give the buffer for the major organizations like WABO and BIAW and I don't know, AIA, whatever, to create their training, you know, stuff and actually provide training for their members and be able to be actually prepared. You give designers a time frame that they have the publications that they can start implementing them into their designs before having to, you know, get them across the finish line. And so, I mean, I guess I just like this date where Dustin said, you know, if you're part of the IRC tag or the whatever, or the IRC energy, where we compressed our time frames and worked fast, hard, everything to push these through in a really short period of time. And now it's like, oh, okay, you know what? Now we're going to move the goalpost again. Guess you could have taken another month or two. Why not do that now instead of continuously having a moving target for the users that we serve? Because that is one of the most frustrating things, is that we have to jam and pack things in, and we plan, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, you know, we can't make it, so we're going to move it 6 months. And now it's like, oh, you knew this, again, you knew this now. That it wasn't necessarily going to work. So I think that yes, SBCC staff should aim to get this across the line November 1st of next year. But then the space between that and whatever implementation date is, you allow for an actual smooth code transition versus chaos. So again, my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Representative Rammel.
Thanks. First, Dustin, just want to acknowledge that every time I hear you talk about this, I learn more about what you and your team are doing that I don't have visibility on. I tend to think about getting a lot done in a year. And 3 years sounds like a lot of time until you start talking. It's yeah, I would just really benefit if you've got a Gantt chart that puts all of that on a page so that I can kind of see what the moving pieces are and what has to get bumped. That would be very helpful. I think for me, and likely for others who are helping to think about this, and especially if we come to a point where we need to sort of sell this to legislators, I think that would be a helpful tool. Happy to help think through what that could look like. And then the second question, I just want to come back to my question, like, why aren't we talking about February? I mean, I understand 6-month blocks are convenient, but if there's a real concern that, May is really pushing things back, it's going to start to deeply compress the 2027 cycle. And it does not, May 1, 2027 does not really honor the urgent work of all of the volunteers and staff that got us there. But November 1 is practically a real challenge. Is there a way to sort of split the difference there and go with a different date? Is there, other than we like 6-month increments, is there a real reason we're not doing that? We're not proposing to do that.
And Representative Rammel, are you also referencing, say the statute doesn't change, then let's get closer to sine die in 2027, which may be March, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of this presumes that we have to have a statute change.
Some change, okay.
Right, yeah. So let's work with what do we want the statute to be, and then go from there.
And on that, just, as we're listing the number of statutes that we might violate in this process if we don't change, I'll say that maybe more carefully. We're not intentionally violating. It's just the reality of the situation. We do have a couple of the legislative mandates that have specific dates, July 1st, November 1st, so forth. We think the interpretation is that that's adoption dates and we're okay. And if we explain it to legislature and the governor and so forth, that everyone understands the situation. But just pointing that out, that there are a couple hard dates locked into law already.
Yeah, let's catalog those and address them in legislation and just make sure we're all comfortable and clear with the interpretation. As long as we're opening up the statute, let's make sure it's crystal clear.
Okay, I'll throw it back to Tom.
Okay, thanks. So in summary, it seems like, well, I'm not trying to end the meeting necessarily, but that we do need to take a look at some of the statutes to see if there's a way to wiggle around the implementation date somewhat. And then as far as, the level of effort that's required by a finite amount of staff at the SBCC needs to be addressed in one manner or another, and if the only source of revenue for that might be, the fees that are attached to building permits, maybe some attention should be put to that too. it seems, you know, I mean, if it's $6 or something like that per permit, even if you raise that by 50%, you know, to $9, that's not going to break the bank for anybody, I don't think. But if that increases that particular source of revenue by that amount of money, you know, that might be enough to get another, you know, high caliber person into the building code council. You know, to take off some of this work that, you know, winds up compressing or expanding, you know, depending on the time of year or the time in the cycle, and ease that burden.
And one other thing about, you know, our revenue stream, you know, it is what it is right now. And we're currently bumping up against our expenditure authority as well, as far as, you know, we could potentially have money right now for some additional staff, but I don't think that the money incoming right now is enough to sustain it. But right now we are, we have money available, but it's outside of our expenditure authority to use.
And that just kind of seems weird.
Well, compared to the other kind of problem, that's the better one.
Very true. Patrick.
I've another question for Dustin. So let's say you introduce a bill that would give you a one-off exception to have the implementation occur in November 2026. But sometimes legislation doesn't get across the finish line until near the end of the session, and there can be delays in the governor signing it. So you might not know the bill passes until beginning of March. You might not know it gets signed until mid or end of March. So that would so as like staff, you might not know if that bill were to not pass, you would be statutorily prohibited from having the code go into effect before the end of the 2027 session. So how would that affect his staff? Would you have to assume that it's going to go into effect and do the mad dash to try to get you know, as much pre-work as you could get done before, but final adoption's not occurring until May? Like, how would that affect your workload, that uncertainty?
So that uncertainty, you know, right now, legal advice is not to violate any statute. So when we file our CR 102, which is coming up here, deadline February 18th of 2026, we're looking at not knowing whether or not we have a bill passed that would allow this. So my advice to the staff, unless, you know, I get a different advice from Dirk, would be to file using the May 1, or if we want to bring it closer to sine die, implementation date. That might allow for us to make a change at CR 103 in alignment with a bill that's passed. I would maybe characterize that as a significant change. So you know, in the 2021 code, we had several emergency filings and permanent rulemakings to bring the implementation date to March 15th. So barring a change at CR 103 going through, we would do some sort of rulemaking to just change the date. And the filings on that, you know, we'd have to go through the expedited rulemaking process, but we would it would introduce a little bit more work, but there's not a lot of draft work to change that one section of WAC. And I think we could get it done pretty easy after final adoption. And, you know, there would probably be a prudent amount of time to wait for the code revisor to finalize their publications in the register. That way we're not having any confusing crisscrossing of, you know, the RDS documents that they use to show the changes. and we could make the change after final adoption if that came down through the legislation.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Justin, can you say again the date in the beginning of next year that's your drop dead date?
So we're targeting a council meeting in January 15th to make a vote, not necessarily on the content of the codes of the CR 102, but we're going to have at that the RDS documents, which are what show the changes to the WAC. So that's the strikeout underlined document showing the changes. We'll have our preliminary cost benefit analysis reports. We'll have our small business economic impact statements. And the council is asked to make a vote on the content of those packages to say, we said move the stuff to CR 102. We're drafting all those documents now. I'm asking the council to bless those before we file them. And then, so that's on January 15th. That council meeting is what the target is. And then the filing date. So if there's any changes that have to happen, we have to have some room to work with the rule drafting service. And but I'm not anticipating changes at that point. And we're targeting February 18th for the final or for the filing deadline for CR 102. That could happen anytime in between January 15th and the 18th. But for planning purposes, I've just chose the code revisor deadlines.
The reason I ask, okay, if I keep going, Chair,
Oh, of
Mr.
course.
Chair.
Yes.
Thanks. The reason I ask, Patrick's point about legislative timelines is a fair one. From time to time, we have bills that, are largely consensus and that are responding to more urgent timelines. We could try, again, if we can build a consensus that this is the right approach, which probably means a more narrow bill. But if we could do so in a way that avoids moving a goalpost, where we say, okay, like, oh, we're going to be done by November 1st, and then actually we kick the can down the road for 6 months and create some uncertainty and challenges for supply chain participants, et cetera. If we could do this in a way that avoids those problems, we could target it as a faster, as a bill that we tried to fast track and get to move sooner than the normal timeline. That is a heavier lift. It is a bigger challenge, but that is an option that we could have on the table. And so what I'm hearing from you is you would need that by that February 15th target filing date.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that we would also need some council action, so as we make changes, I am trying to avoid any draft work or changes to any of the content of our CR 102 just on the notion that staff thinks that this is what is appropriate. And I would like the council to be able to have the opportunity to make a motion on that change. So I think, we wouldn't have to necessarily 100% target the January 15th council meeting date if we needed some more time for the legislative action to occur before the 18th. I mean, as we're talking about the challenges as well, the May 15th date could move. I'm not attracted to trying to move that final adoption date, but if we needed to shift that out one more month to give a little bit more time for the legislature to bring some of this effect to bear, we could target a filing deadline either later in February or early March.
Okay. Yeah, and we couldn't do January. Like that's unrealistic.
I don't think that that's possible.
February, especially late February. I think again, without having polled my colleagues, that does not seem outside the range of kinds of things we have done during my tenure.
Okay, well, that sounds encouraging, I think. It solves one of the problems, or it potentially would.
You know, thinking about, you know, the implementation date is a part of the whole problem. And if we can solve the direction and reduce the uncertainty for our, you know, end users, I think that that's, you know, the biggest value for us right now. And then I think in order to address maybe the into the future cycle problems, that it deserves a little bit deeper dive into the legislation and how that is beneficial for the process and what the quality that it's bringing to the process, but then, you know, try to identify how that hems us in and poses the challenges based on our timelines. And so I think a deep dive into 1927 and 1927A would be good for this group to discuss, you know, at a granular level, each, you know, kind of requirement that we're facing down here.
And all that, you know, coupled with the whole time needing additional staff. I mean, I don't want that to get kind of lost in the mix here, because, you know, if any one of you were to just say, I just had it, we'd be kind of screwed, to put it bluntly. So, I mean, as a council, we would, because it's a lot of work you guys do behind the scenes. It's kind of like your 911 dispatchers, you know. You don't know what that's like until you've sat in that chair. So,
Yeah.
and I
For the
appreciate
2024 cycle, I felt a little bit like a quarterback who's out of the pocket.
that. On your own. Todd?
Yeah, I hope that's implied in everything in this discussion today, that it's in support of, especially the staff, on how to offer relief, you know, either more resources or appropriately when appropriately time. So I think there's a couple things I heard here. Thank you, Representative Rammel. So on that strategy, which makes a lot of sense, if there's a short, narrow bill that would solve our immediate problem, that's interesting. And then defer to you and the legislature and how we also could do these more substantive changes, you know, that might be cleanup, because we are going to miss on, we all laughed a little bit when Dustin, you made the statement that our council advises we don't break statute, but we're going to miss a couple things. And so we got to unpack, you know, more deeply why we're going to miss certain things. And there's things we found this time, like, why is there a 30-month requirement after adoption date by ICC, which we don't have control of, and that then, you know, put us in a corner, you know, with a kind of another statute, and it was tricky to understand, still is. So obviously, we'd like to have those discussions in addition to going fast on the immediate solution.
Yeah, you wonder if those deadlines, you know, that were established back whenever they were established, you know, maybe seemed pretty generous. But with the complexity of the way things are going right now, you know, and all that's required, makes those deadlines a lot more difficult.
And then that question of, Dustin, as you proposed, should we actually wait one more year to begin the process after publication? And I don't know, but that's where that conversation, I think, would happen.
Okay, does it feel like we have somewhat of a game plan here, or at least a good thought process going forward?
Well, I feel like I have some homework. I want to get you that Gantt chart, Representative Rommel. And then I would like to begin the deep dive on our statute and start that by identifying the statutes that identify either specific dates or timelines, and bring those to talk about. And then, you know, that might lead to talking about other requirements that we're meeting within those timelines and dates that we can drill down further. But right now, it's the cycle as a whole and the timeline that it is in, and some of the challenges that have led to the delays that we experienced up until the 2024. And it would be my sincere hope that we can get the cycle back on track to where we're not, you know, delayed at the beginning and then fighting to try to make up the time the whole time. And you know, if we could, if there's a way to fix that, and, you know, additional staffing is part of it, but it's not the only, that's not the easy fix for it. I think we have some other process issues to identify as well.
Go ahead.
Can I ask just a couple of quick and I think concrete questions about sort of moving this forward. Dustin, are you still sort of seeing yourself as bottom lining this process in terms of, bill concept development and organizing? Somebody's got to kind of compile bullet points here and then think through some optional concepts that Todd and others have talked about. I think we ought to take a look at the funding piece, at least consider it. Do you see yourself as compiling this, and then we'll touch base? You don't have.
Yes,
Does that
yes,
work?
with the caveat, like I would love, I want to do that, yes, but I'm also, with the lack of code specialists here, I'm still spearheading, the work I had as a code specialist plus the managing director role as well. So, I'm working with Krista and Brandon to keep their codes on track, but then I'm also still working my own. So I'm, still on the hook for the residential code, the building code, the fire code, and the WUI code is not an issue for us at the moment, but it will become one soon. And so I have a lot of work to try to get all that done. My staff is very gracious, and when they, complete some of the stuff that they're on, they are coming over to help what I've got going on as well. So we are, all hands on deck trying to, address the things that we can address and just keep things moving towards that finish line. And so I want to be involved in this process as much as possible to identify the solutions, because I do have a vision for how the staff integrates with the council, and then, really keeps the council on the tracks for observing our timelines and the statutes that may be into the future. And so I would like to, write down the bullet points, get you the Gantt chart, and I'd start identifying stuff. And then, maybe after we can identify some beginning parts, then we can disseminate some of that, the finer detail work to others as well. But I would like to undertake some of that, yes.
Yeah, I think if we started with bullet points, I am happy to ask my team to take it from bullet points and start working on turning it into bill language. So we've got pen to paper on that. And then I think, we all need to do a little bit of thinking about what does a strategy look like to build consensus around this. I think there's 3 other legislators that are in the Code Council, ex officio members. Be good to, have conversations with each of them, try to make sure their concerns are addressed and see if we can, again, build that consensus. And, if in the instances when we've had 4 of us aligned in bills that I've worked on in the past, that's been a pretty good signal to the rest of the legislature that, hey, this has been well thought through. This is non-controversial. This is a good idea. So I think that's an approach I'd love to take if we can here. So we just need to spend a little bit of time thinking about a strategy. But I'm usually of the opinion that legislative strategy should be downstream from the substance of the policy. So why don't we tackle the substance of the policy? If you can send me the bullet points, I've got some notes here too, and we can compile those and start looking at a bill, and then we'll tackle the strategy following that.
I really appreciate it.
Sound good?
Yeah, well, and if I may comment, Chair,
Of course.
I was going to be a little more direct. Thank you for that, Dustin. But this is the purpose of this committee, and I think the legislative chair should be the point of contact for a couple of reasons. One, the authority to this committee to inform is given under the council through actual action, and I think that also needs to give Dustin and team and DES a little cover so that they don't get in crosshairs that they're doing more than informing the legislature. Because I think also government affairs from DES would have to, come into play. So I really want to push this on the council if we can.
Okay. Well, let's, collaborate in that fashion, and we'll
Okay.
work that way.
Yeah, if you can just put that together and then copy us, then we can all
And then Tom as chair
do
can
the same thing.
really facilitate.
Got it. That's helpful. Thanks, Todd.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else regarding this at the moment? Seeing nothing, all right, we'll move on to other business. Anything else anybody else wants to bring up for the legislative committee?
Just we got the stuff, the legislative session looming on us. It seems a little bit far away, but it's not that far away at all. And you know, I'm interested in having this group meet on the weekly cadence like we did in the session for 2024. And just if that doesn't work for this group, I'd like to kind of discuss what would work for the group. But I think the weekly, you know, touch base for legislative matters was working for us in the last year. And so as we get ready to engage with the executive committee to plan meetings for the 2026 year, we'll also be looking at the 2027 code cycle, and the legislative committee just kind of be part of that regular schedule that we want to put out there. And so pretty much Thursdays at 1 was the what we did last year. And I'd like to continue that into this legislative session.
The next meeting for this group is,
It would be, right now, there's nothing on the books, but we'd be targeting right either before the legislative session starts or as it starts. But I'm happy to have more meetings with this group as we get closer.
we may want to do that in order to kind of hone in on some of this
Yes.
stuff that we can deliver to Representative Remmel.
And we can, you know, we have pretty decent availability right now. Most of the tags meetings are tapering off. Committee meetings, you know, most of the other meetings for the council happen on Fridays. So if we want to continue meeting with the legislative committee, we could have some either another meeting in November on a Thursday at 1, or we can I'd be open to any combination of stuff. But we got some availability that this group can meet.
Okay, well, that sounds good. I'm personally not available that week of the 17th. But other than that, probably be good to touch bases with everybody.
Okay. Well, how about we'll send out some polling and get the desires, and maybe we meet sooner than later.
Okay. That sounds good. All right, anything else for the good of the order? Well, thanks everybody for all of your input. I think we at least have a direction, so we'll head down that path.
Yes, I really appreciate everybody's time today, and you know, thinking about solutions and making the process better. I think that we have good council members, we got good staff, and we've got good constituents coming to the table, and we're all working towards the same solution, which is serving the Washingtonians with the building code. And so appreciate everybody's time and thoughts on the matter.
All right. Last call for good of the order. All right, then.
Thank
We
you.
will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.